Good evening and welcome to Irish TV. My name is Áine Duffy. I'd like to say thank you to Positive Age here in Drummondley, Cavan for the use of the studio in Castle Manor. Agus anish, fáilte mar raibh an fear seo. Fear iontach agus fear an gnách. Is mai leis an íscaireacht agus an filiacht. Tá sin am caint cúpla focail as Gaeilge freisin. What can I say? Fear iontach. Former teacher, journalist, president of the Irish Freedom Party and advisor in the European Parliament. Good evening, Hermann Kelly.
Trún away.
Thank you for coming to Cavan on this day.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Very, very mild. No snow. Met friends in Virginia. Had a good time already. Apologies for being late.
Christmas Day, so many years ago, in your family, there was a little bit of a miracle.
Yeah. My father used to really enjoy telling the story of my birth. And what happened was that I was born 2 months premature and I was classed dead on arrival. And my father was sent to the cemetery in Derry to arrange my burial. And as the nurse was carrying me to the morgue, walking past my father, he said, "Sorry, nurse, I think I saw a twitch in his body there." She says, "Yeah, that's rigor mortis. All corpses have that." He says, "Look, I'll go to the cemetery, but just for my own peace of mind, could you put his body back in the incubator until I come back, just for my own peace of mind?" So he went off, arranged my burial, and from out in the Galvin Hospital, off he went, came back, and there was Herman urinating in the incubator, and all was fine. And since then, revived and thrived and caused trouble as much as I can ever since.
I'm very grateful for incubators,
yes.
I would say. So let's get back to the early days of Herman. You were born in Derry,
yes.
Obviously, on that day, on that Christmas Day, so many years ago.
Yeah, I'm nothing to be ashamed of. I was born on Christmas Day 1968. So I was born at the very beginning of the Troubles, and our house was the second last house in the city. It was in the Brandywell, which is the Republican part of the Bogside. And because of what was happening in Ireland at that time, it was in the beginning of the Troubles, and our area on our street and was a very strategic place. There was an army checkpoint out the road on the Letterkenny Road. Our house was the second last house, and there was a very large hill behind, which was a good vantage point for shooting. In front there was a wall which faced onto the Letterkenny Road, great for rioting. So it was an area where there was a lot of action. Maybe 9 and 10 were left in the house, maybe a bit older. And British soldiers came into the garden with dogs and spades to search for guns and bombs or whatever in the garden. They had a search warrant. So in they went into the garden. They didn't find any guns or bombs. They went back out, and as they left, out of, I think, malice, out of frustration, there was this plastic greenhouse that my cousin had built, and the British soldiers broke it up with the butts of their gun, just out of malice, because we were paddies, we were Fenians. And I remember shouting at the window. I won't tell you what I shouted, but it wasn't very complimentary. But it did put in my mind the idea, never give people not your own power over you. They will always attempt to destroy you. And from that experience, my political philosophy in that regard has not changed. Never give people not your own power over you. They will always destroy you. And that's why I'm quite Eurosceptic. But I grew up in Derry, and we also had a farm just over the border in Donegal. So I had experience of the kind of urban, rural life of, I would say, guerrilla warfare, but the Troubles were at their height. And also the farm just over the border in Donegal, which is obviously sheep, Texel, Suffolk. So that was my experience.
Well, that's amazing, because I would have grown up in the same time and been from Cavan, been like 12 miles away from the border, and of course you heard of the Beltermit bombing so many years ago as well, where 2 innocent children were killed. But like, my goodness, and I used to think and actually feel guilty how different my lifestyle was to somebody growing up in Northern Ireland in the troubled times. Now, I can see, and I have spoken, I know people that live in Northern Ireland, and I can see that you have to be a Catholic or a Protestant. You cannot be religious at all. You're very influenced. You are judged by your name to be one or the other. And also, as well, I can see where your political views would come from as well, and that's amazing. It was not like that in the South. Okay, we had certain things going on, but not like that in the South. Now, you spoke about your dad, and your dad was a principal school teacher.
Yes.
And he too saw a lot of that trouble and had to guard his children and look out for his school children in that time. And actually, there's a clip of him where he was interviewed in 1973 after Bloody Sunday, isn't that right?
Yes.
By RTE.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have a look at that now.
Great.
People dying very often doesn't have the same deep implications to a kid at that particular time as it does to an adult. Really, I found this myself in kids of 9 to 12. It's an emotional shock, but it isn't very obvious at the time. What it does to the kid inside is shown in the...
Before, my sister sent it to me there last week. I saw it, and it's incredible to see my father when he was, younger than I am now. It was 1973. I was 3-4 years of age. And to hear his voice and to see him speak is very, very touching. It's funny, he's more kind of country accent than I remember when I was 20 and 30, when I was older, more self-conscious. But I do remember the time, not that 1973, but when I was 10 and 11, and the stress and the trouble he had to protect, like his primary school was 900 pupils in the school. That's a lot of kids. And he saw his vocation in life was to provide the best education that he could for kids in Craigan, that they could have the most opportunities that he could provide for them. And also, it was also a matter of national pride to contribute to Ireland, to make a better Ireland. And as an Irish nationalist, he saw it as to build up Ireland and to give children the best education that he could possibly do.
I could see from that clip that he was there for the benefit of his children, but he was also worrying about the future of his children as they grew up.
Yes. Yeah, because...
the effect the troubles would have on
them.
them.
Things at the time were very nasty. Look, I remember in class, and the drawings of the kids in class were all about Saracens and jeeps and water cannons and plastic bullets, because that's what we saw at night. And I remember a teacher making a remark about that once, about what we were drawing. But that's what we saw. But luckily, we also had the thing of a time I remember on the bus, and there was plenty of singing. There was a lot of joy there as well. So this idea that it was all drudgery and fear is not true. And, like, to be straight up, sometimes the rioting and stuff like that, it was also fun. So let's not kid ourselves.
Do you remember one thing I remember as well? I don't know if it was fun, but it was amazing. When the women knew that the jeeps were on the way or the British soldiers were on the way, they clapped the lids of the dustbins on the street, like that sort of thing went on. Speaking
but there was that two sides. There was like rioting as sport, and there was also the thing of...
Did you chase some of those Saracens?
Yes, and petrol bombs and stuff like that.
You fired a few petrol bombs?
We did that. It was part of growing up where I was. But the flip side of that is that there were pupils in my father's school who were shot and killed by plastic bullets. Yeah. So I remember Guy McComiskey was killed. He was 10 years of age. My father was deeply affected by that. And as everybody, it was very upsetting. And so the violence, people did and said things at the time which, when they cooled down, they regretted, because they could see the damage that violence does. And myself, I think, having a close experience of political violence, it's turned me very strongly against it. So I have no time for political violence at all.
Okay. Speaking of national school, you went yourself. You went to St. Columns, isn't that?
St. Columns.
St. Columns, and it's got some very famous past pupils, shall we say. You've got Seamus Heaney, Phil Coulter, Well, who else did we talk about?
Brian Friel,
Brian
the
Friel. John
playwright.
Hume, of course.
John Hume, yeah.
Yeah.
My father taught him, actually. And he was in our house the night before I was born, because I was born. They weren't expecting me, obviously. And my father taught him. And yeah, I think the school, St. Colum's College, it wasn't, at the time, it was just, when I was there, it started to emphasise science and maths and getting more economically, but traditionally it was more as a grammar school, not only just the Latin,
It was a boys'
the
school,
language. It
wasn't
was an
it?
all boys
boys.
grammar school, but there was a very strong emphasis on history, on Irish, on Gaelic games, on like the cultural formation.
Is that where you learned Gaeilge?
Yes, yes.
Gaeilge,
And
yeah.
dressed me in Cloiste Olú Garda Harca, near the me Neasoiga Fasta. So it was a great emphasis on the cultural formation of proud Irishmen, that they could contribute and build up their country. And after coming from my father's school, St. John's, and then St. Colum's College, that was... And we grew up, and I remember in the sixth form centre, boys would stand up on the tables when the teachers went there, and they would give these great orations by Padraig Pearse or James Connolly, and that's where we got our political formation.
So you went to secondary school, and I guess you did rather well, because you went I think it was to Edinburgh, and you did marine biology. And like the only thing I can see connected with you today is your love of fishing. But
Yes.
anyway,
Yeah, I since I was a kid, we were the second last house, and the River Foyle was a few hundred yards away, and boys used to walk down and go fishing. I would ask them as they came past, "Did you catch anything today?" So eventually I would go meet gangs of maybe a group of 10 boys would go down, and I'd be the wee fella of 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever, and older men of 20. We would all go off fishing, and that's the kind of love that I've always had. And I studied marine biology. I was very interested in salmon fishing, and even now today, the whole idea of wild salmon fishing and the purity of our waters. Like the party and myself is actually ecologically attentive. We want an Ireland which is not only beautiful but clean and green, and that pertains to like clean water, clean air, that the waters are clean, that the salmon can live, that the air is clean, that birds can live, and that we can all live in Ireland. And I think that stuff about trying to do everything possible to stop pollution of our airways.
some say we're too late
It's very
at this
important.
stage. Some say we're too late.
No, I don't think, and I don't think the problem is actually CO2, which is necessary for photosynthesis, but things like nitrous oxide and all these sulfur in the air. I think these pollutants are the problem, rather than
Emissions of
carbon
gas.
dioxide, which is
Emissions of
important
gas.
for photosynthesis.
Okay, so then you went, I don't know, but you went to college in Maynooth, and you studied theology as a
Yes.
lay person.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, when I was in Edinburgh, I used to go and study a lot and read in the National Library. I was very interested in history and politics and in philosophy. And from my love of philosophy and what they call epistemology, about what is truth, I then developed an interest in theology. And I think growing up during the Troubles as well, things like history, culture, language, all these things are important. So I developed an interest in it, went and studied theology as a lay student, and I had a great time in Maynooth because there was a stream that studied theology and arts. I was only at the first year, I was the only lay student in the clerics class, and I always used to say I studied theology in hurling because I loved it actually. I had a great time there, great friends from there.
You thought for a while. You were a teacher.
Yeah, and after that I went to Glasgow. I became a teacher, and then I was teaching in Ireland for years. Catholic University School, St. Conleth's in Dublin. And after that I was always a few teachers in school, in primary school and secondary school. I had a great love of English, even though I only studied it until I was 16. But I always continued reading short stories, poetry.
That brings out the journalist in you, really.
Yes.
You have worked for the Irish Catholic, isn't that right?
Yes.
And other publications as
I was
well.
writing then, like for the Irish Mail on Sunday.
Did you stop teaching then?
Yes. I got a phone call one day from the guy asking, would you like to be a journalist? Because I wrote a few articles for the National Press, I think a Sunday Business Post, People saw it. McGill magazine, someone saw that. And I got a phone call one day, would you like to be a journalist? I never thought of it before, but yeah, I'll give it a go over the summer, see how we get on. And I really enjoyed it, and they thought I was good at it, so I stayed at it. And I became a journalist. And
did that bring out your political views then? We're going to get to your political life now.
Yes, I think at that time, we were speaking earlier, when I was doing journalism maybe 15 years ago, 20, 15, maybe even 12 years ago, I think there was a lot more diversity in the press, in the mainstream media, that they had people like Kevin Myers, John Waters, Hermann Kelly, Ronan Mullen, Mary Ellen Synan, people with different views, contrary to the people who were willing to swim against the big stream. And I think it's
the stream is too strong now for
too
people to
strong,
do it now.
and it's washing away alternative views, and sometimes to have contrarians to point out, actually, do you know what, guys? There's actually trouble here, and everyone should come and have a look. I think it's very important to have a diversity of views in the mainstream press, that people can see alternative viewpoints, and we can. And in these arguments that we have, people can assess the differences and the strength of various arguments and make up their mind.
But you say now that's not the way now.
I think when you look at these people, Kevin Myers, John Waters, Herman Kelly, Mary Ellen, they've all been wiped out, and there's a very globalist, or there's an anti-nationalist sentiment. I think that people are happy, enthusiastic to be ruled by that so many of our laws are made by people we didn't elect in Brussels. I think is very dangerous. That, for instance, in regards fishing, Ireland has fantastic, very fertile waters. We are an island nation, and yet Irish boats are only allowed to catch 15% of fish in Irish waters. 85% go to EU boats from Portugal and Spain and France. And I think, well, shouldn't we be looking at the freedom for Irish men and women to develop Irish fisheries just off our island?
Well, that could bring us up to the Irish Freedom Party, of which you are the president.
Yes.
And you went up for election.
Yes.
It didn't go very well.
Didn't go very well.
It's going to be hard to build. It's hard for new parties to get in there.
Yeah, I think. But
you're still there. You're still.
I think someone on TV, just going on TV late at night, someone who's been out of the country for some time, because I've been in Brussels for 11 years working in the European Parliament. Yes, but all big oaks start with acorns, and I've planted firmly in the kind of scheme of ideas in Ireland, the idea that Irish people are good enough to make our own laws, to control our own borders, to decide our own budgets, and that Irish people alone, we're good enough to decide the destiny that we want for Ireland. And I think that is very important.
So that brings us to the point where the question I'm going to ask you is, like, you are anti-EU.
Yes.
You want a Brexit. You want Ireland to break free.
Yes.
Okay. Where do you think that'll take us?
Well, we've had a Brexit before, so it's not a novelty. We broke away from the political union that was the British Empire, where we had 16% of the votes in the Westminster Parliament. That was just over 100 years ago now. We had the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which was for Ireland, at least part of Ireland, 26 counties to break away from the British Empire, the North to remain in. And that was Ireland's first Brexit, to leave the political union. Now, we were under British rule, we were 16% in the Westminster Parliament. Under the EU, which is another political union by which people we didn't elect can impose laws upon us, and there's nothing we can do, that we are less than 1% of the votes in the Brussels Council of Ministers. So we have much less democratic power in Brussels than we had under Westminster control. So I believe that we're good enough to make our own laws, and if we do it for our own good, we're better off. And we're better off out of the European Union. I don't think we can afford the EU anymore. Last year...
I don't think we can afford to be single either.
Well, we've
do
been...
you see the problems that England has encountered, Great Britain, or England, I should say, has encountered for leaving the EU? It it shook the economy. It shook England's image all over the world. We've had the problems of shortages, how to look out for borders, the threats of borders here in Ireland and things like that. Little old Ireland, do you think we would want to go through that?
Little old Ireland we have a diaspora of 70 million across the world. For a lot of people who look upon Ireland with very positive terms, we have a great and very creative and in European terms, it's a very young quite a young population that I don't believe we can afford the EU anymore. We've been a net contributor in cash terms to the EU budget since 2013. Every year now we're giving net contribution of 700 million and we have a gross contribution of over 2.5 billion per year.
So we are already in great debt. You say 50,000 euros per head per capita.
Our public debt is 264 billion. That's 50,000 per head. We're in massive debt. And you remember where do we get this debt from? In 2007, we had a public debt of 50 million, I believe. Yeah, I'm sure that's right. And then it ballooned by 2013. Remember, the EU imposed Franco-German bank debt of 64 billion upon the Irish taxpayer. They also took our pension fund of 20 billion. And in the same time, we are a net contributor. And also EU boats are plundering Irish waters. And since we joined, they've taken 215 billions worth of fish out of our waters, according to Dr. Karen Devine of DCU. So with the fishing, with our net contribution, with the debt that they've imposed upon Ireland, and with the legislation which curbs our freedom to trade across the globe. At the minute, Ireland, now, we are not in a political union with the United States. We don't have a trade agreement with the United States, but we send 27% of our exports to the US. So that goes to show that you don't have to be in a political union with a country. The thing that matters is that they want to buy your goods. You can make them. They want to buy it. And all that matters is that business have the freedom to trade and sell.
But if we break free,
yes,
and in the morning there's an exit, we're back at square one. We are square one with a debt.
Public debt is a problem. That's why our party is in favour of a smaller state, a lower public spending, lower taxation to encourage, incentivise people to work. We're not in favour of welfare dependency. We are in favour of a free people in a free country, and that helping to make people independent of the state, to be more self-sufficient. So Ireland is actually broke. We don't have money for public spending.
After COVID, believe me, we're going to have less. But I can see here, this is where you're getting labelled far right.
No, we're not far right. We're just right so far. We are labelled this by people like the Irish Communist Party, by the loony left, like People Before Profit, all these very far and micro left-wing groups who you probably haven't even heard of, called far right. That's a ridiculous idea. People who are far right go around in bobber boots with skinheads and beat up old grannies. We are a party in favour of free speech, of lower taxation, of personal freedom and responsibility, and national sovereignty. We're, as I said...
What percentage of the population is on the same page as you, do you think?
In regards, I think that we are appealing to a third of the population.
A third didn't vote for you in your
No, they didn't
elections.
vote, but they haven't even heard, because the mainstream press are not going to do us any favours, because the mainstream press, for the vast majority of part, are economically left-wing. They're in favour of more taxation, more public debt, EU control, mass immigration. That's what they're all in favour of. We are opposed. We want for Ireland to decide our tax policy, our immigration policy.
When you say Ireland,
Yes.
are you talking about we're going to say for the folk out there to know, you are talking about Southern Ireland, of course.
No, I'm talking about
Well, then
Ireland,
that
which is
blows-
32 counties.
We're
We're an all-Ireland party. We have members north and south.
So
I'm from the
you're
north
looking
myself.
Yeah, but you're looking for a united Ireland in this.
Yes, we want not just a united...
So do you think that's
no,
a way of getting Northern Ireland back?
Yes. It is. We want not just a united Ireland, but a united and sovereign, independent Ireland. That's what the men and women of 1916 and generations before that, that's what they were looking for. A sovereign, independent Ireland, free of London and now of Brussels control.
Okay, so...
But an important thing we
want to
do
say
have
that?
is about the importance of free speech. The people should be free to give their opinions and give their assessments of the events of the day, and we are opposed to the big state. We are opposed to the state taking your money. That we think that people are better off deciding how their money is spent rather than the big inefficient state, and especially that the state should not be allowed to give privileges to certain groups which it chooses. All citizens are equal before the law at the minute, and we believe that's the way it should remain. It's very important.
Do you know what you say there and what your firms and what you believe? It sounds like a very early Sinn Féin kind of a thing.
Yes.
Doesn't it?
Like
Before they got into government.
Yeah, we are a Republican Party that believes that in a sovereign, independent Ireland. We are saddened that Sinn Féin has, in the last decade or so, become a European Unionist party, or maybe a Euro loyalist party, that they are happy for laws to be made in Brussels by people we didn't elect and imposed upon us, and there's nothing we can do. That is not democratic self-governance, as the people of 1916
Very hard to
wanted.
fight against, though, isn't it? Because that's when you get into Parliament, when you get into government, that's the way it works. That's the way it goes.
And other aspects, we're also in favour of personal freedom, personal responsibility. This whole thing about the lockdown, where the government can dictate to people that where you can travel, if you can go to work, if you can see your family.
It's not a law. It's kind of like a recommendation at a time.
No, some are laws, some are guidelines.
But it keeps changing.
It changes every week.
So it's not like dead curfew sort of. It's not like we're held to ransom or
Well, last summer
like
there were curfews and people weren't.
Yeah,
no,
but
sorry.
that was just
People
for summer.
weren't.
They were doing it in the best. Some would say they were doing it in the best interest of the health of the public.
That is the argument of every draconian regime in the history of the world, that we're doing this for your own good. People were not allowed to travel 5 kilometres from their home.
Yeah, that lasted a few weeks, so it didn't go on forever, so
yes,
it's not so bad.
But now, when people are told you can't go into a pub or restaurant after 8 o'clock, that's destroying the livelihood of people.
It's just till January. It's not forever.
No, we were told it's only for 3 weeks. Was it flatten the curve? It's only for 3 weeks. It's all fine. And now, almost two years afterwards, many people have lost their jobs. Many people
have died.
5,500 sadly have died.
That wouldn't have died if there was. That would possibly.
Well, I'm not blaming.
Still be here.
No one is blaming the government for COVID. No one is blaming the government for COVID, but the people who have lost their jobs, people who have sadly not, for instance, had their cancer diagnosed because of cancelled medical appointments, like the consequences of the lockdown.
But it's not good to go scaring people either. About
No, but I do think people like Tony Holohan and these guys, Professor McConkie, making up models with scary ideas about 150,000 people are going to be dead by October. Those models that they came up with and projected on the public engender fear, but actually also turned out to be completely untrue.
That's right. Well, at least that was proven, and I'm glad it was, because I listened to it myself and working in the health industry. I was glad it wasn't as scary as they were making out. And some of the most ridiculous rules, it's a bugbear.
What was your favourite? As the most ridiculous one?
I liked where I heard you at meeting, and I liked where you quoted Luke O'Neill of having your granny beside the window for Christmas with the window open.
Picture the cheek. It's so outrageous.
But it was serious.
Sometimes you got to laugh.
Good.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to laugh. The cheek of some guy thinking that they're going to tell people seriously, put your granny beside the window. And the one about, we're all going to be saved because we have to buy a €9 meal of chicken nuggets.
And another one I couldn't figure out, was you go into Dunnes Stores and there's goods on this side of a line and goods that side, and you couldn't cross over that line and buy that thing there, but you could here. Like, what's that got to do with the virus?
Actually, coming here this evening, I was walking down the street here in Cavan, and I seen this guy running along, and he was shouting out, "I've already taken 3 vaccines." And there was a doctor running after him with a vaccine syringe saying, "Come here, you anti-vaxxer."
Okay,
yeah.
So getting
on that, I believe in personal freedom and responsibility. People should be able, personally, with their doctor, to make the choices, have the freedom to
I'd like
choice.
you to verify your stance on that, because I did ask you initially, are you an anti-vaxxer?
No.
Right. So clarify.
But if people want to take the vaccine, I would say to them, best of luck. Have 2, have 5, have as many as you like. But as long as the state does not have the freedom to dictate to people what they must put inside their body.
They will make the recommendations at the moment.
Recommendations is fine, but don't by practical means of saying to people, yeah, but you can't go to work, but you can't travel. Like, that is a mechanism of making it mandatory in practical terms. And I'm opposed to mandatory curbing of people's freedoms. And I personally believe that if we allow the state to dictate what we put inside our bodies, that what freedom can you say that you have any longer?
Actually, they don't have to make rules to make you take the vaccine, because
if someone is good,
if you don't take the vaccine and your job is you deal in health or you deal in public or something like that, you in effect, nobody will work with you. Your colleagues mightn't work with you. You will be redeployed somewhere else where it's not your skill set. So they don't need the rules to do it. It's happening, you know.
Well, I think the whole thing about the mandatory digital cert that comes from the European Union is a means of, if it is a means of communication which could or would lead to a kind of Chinese-style social credit scheme, I believe that is very, very dangerous. Now, I hope with this Omicron variant, which seems to be weaker, very transmittable, but weaker in regards to fatality, that I do hope that this is the beginning of the end, and that, yes, it seems that a lot of people are getting it at the moment, but there's much less fatalities than there were a year ago.
Possibly.
I think the variant is much weaker.
Okay, it's probably wearing itself out.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. But it's important that we take, as a people, all these freedoms which have been robbed off us by the government, take them all back.
So I'll just give you an update on Luke O'Neill. He is now playing in a band with Mary Coughlin. Did you know that?
I didn't, but fair play to him. Great on him.
Okay, so we're going to talk about, you said you spent 11 years in Brussels, which is quite interesting. You work there in the European Parliament, isn't that it?
Yes.
And you've got some, you brought us in some photographs there. Now, I wonder if we can get them to move on, if you'd like to talk about them.
Well, this one, so...
and of course, Nigel Farage.
Yes.
Like, that seems to be a contradiction in terms.
Yeah.
He's the
British nationalist.
The British nationalist.
Quintessential.
And you're the Irish nationalist.
Quintessential
and the
Irish
two of you are
nationalist.
singing from the same page.
Yes.
Now that blows some people's minds.
It is, we agree in principle of democratic self-determination for our country. He's British, I'm Irish. We both believe that you can't be a member of the EU and a self-determining state at the same time. So we want to leave the EU. But we did agree to disagree on the status of Northern Ireland.
Okay, so we see a picture of yourself there with Nigel Farage.
Yes.
And if they move on.
Yes, so I was head of communications in the European Parliament for a group, the Eurosceptic group, of which he was president. It was called the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy Group.
Okay, so...
And so we'll talk about this one.
Yeah.
So this is...
So they're moving on, but
okay.
you pick one and speak about it, yeah.
Yeah, this is the genuine Wexford pike from the 18th century. This is members of the Irish Freedom Party on O'Connell Street there on St. Patrick's Day. This is me in the River Erith in Mayo with my first salmon at the age of 15. Look at that thick hair, my God, it's so dark. This is me...
that's not just the fish he's talking about.
Gaelic football team in Edinburgh when I was in my early 20s. St. Colum's College, I think this is the minor team. Some very good players there. Look at me, this is me playing Gaelic football in Edinburgh, and that guy was absolutely huge. This guy, a friend of mine, Timo Soini, Hibernophile, he is vice president, or he was vice president of Finland.
Finland.
It was me campaigning against the carbon tax in Dublin there 2 years ago. And this is the launch of the Irish Freedom Party. And to the right there is a friend, Ray Bassett. This is Nigel Farage outside the European Council in Brussels. And it was obviously very hot. And here's the peak of life of Hermann with a 9-pound salmon from this summer from the River Mourne there in County Tyrone. Oh, here's me again. That's me working in the European Parliament. And there's my father, Hugh Kelly.
Dad.
And you can see we're both very happy and happy in each other's company.
So, Nigel, we're going to talk about, just to finish off perhaps, as you have said, you have sown the acorn of what you would like to see for Ireland. You know, the Irish Freedom Party have a vision for Ireland. Now, if I put it to you and I said... And
it's very contrarian to the mainstream at the moment.
It is. Yeah. And it's hard for people to understand.
Not only in regards the idea of national sovereignty, but even in regards personal freedom and also taxation and fiscal policy, and even to do with the provision of housing and energy. Like, we realise that, we are pretty contrary.
But you have sown the seeds of a very slow-growing kernel.
Mm. Yeah, well, we're going to start it, and we're going to keep on trucking. And the men of 1916 were spat on. They were a small minority. They were spat on. But circumstances, everything came to a head. Everything they said came to be. And eventually, these small group of unusual contrarians, events occurred, and they were proven right. They got popular support, and some of what they looked for happened.
Okay.
So that's what I'm hoping for 100 years afterwards.
I'm just going to hit you with one thing. You've been a bold boy once or twice in Brussels.
Yes.
You were caught
singing Republican songs.
Yes. In a pub. Yeah. Explain.
We were out with friends. I was out with friends and met friends of mine, some who were in Sinn Féin, other Irish friends of mine, some friends from Sweden, and we were just having a few beers and singing a few songs. And there was a British journalist in there who thought it was very odd that Nigel Farage's press officer was singing Republican songs.
Yeah, well, that kind of reminds me of your man, the Irish soccer guy, John Delaney. Remember, he got caught singing a few songs one time too?
Right. I don't have his money, not in the public purse, sadly.
Okay, so I'm going to give you, Hermann, it was really interesting talking to you, and thank you. I'm sure, hopefully lots of people looking at this were saying, oh my God, there's so many questions she could have asked him, but she didn't. But like the man, you spoke it anyway. Just before you go, I'm going to give you your camera, and I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to tell the people of Ireland the vision you have for Ireland.
I would like, basically, what I want for Ireland, and the Irish Freedom Party wants for Ireland, is a free people in a free country, where Irish people alone have the freedom to decide our laws which impact our life. So we want the freedom to decide our budgets, our laws, the policies which affect us, say, as opposed to carbon tax. And we want to support rural Ireland. We are a pro-natalist and a pro-life party, which is supportive of the natural family, where children can be brought up by the mother and father to have children, that they can be educated about the history and the culture of Ireland, that they can love our country, and we can build a better country for us all. I also believe in freedom of speech, that diversity of opinion and freedom to argue our point and everyone's point is allowed in the public square. We believe we should control our own borders, so eventually people can buy houses, and we should develop Ireland's maritime resources. And look, there's a big world out there, and that Ireland should be able to trade with the rest of the world without being constricted by a political union costing us a fortune. Go to Margaret's.
Well, that was a long 2 minutes. Herman, we said in the introduction that you were a fan of fishing and of poetry.
Yes.
So we have got many great poets, writers, actors, musicians, all sorts of people in Cavan. But one good friend of Cavan TV is Noel Monaghan. Now, Noel, I can't claim him as a Cavan man because he's born in Granite, County Longford, but he's lived all his working life as a teacher.
He's probably Cavan man by aspiration.
He is, yeah. And we've interviewed him a few times on Cavan. He's a great poet and a playwright. Yeah. So, Cavan TV's big budget. We're going to give you a copy of Noel's book, his poetry book, Noel Monaghan, and it's called Chalk Dust.
Great.
And we hope you enjoy reading it.
Well, I actually have a poem myself. It's on the website of the Irish Freedom Party, irishfreedom.ie. It's called An Brad an Fasa, the Salmon of Knowledge. It's about a beautiful place, a beautiful image of a salmon going up a river, and it ends with that line about Gaelic whispers of immortality.
Perfect, great. Well, what a wonderful evening and what an enlightening conversation. Thank you, Herman. Intense at times, but we're good.
Hopefully a pleasure.
I'd like to say thanks to all our viewers on Irish Web TV and wish you the best. And of course, it is the new year and we hope for a better financial, a more healthy and more friendly and more relaxed new year for 2022. Thank you. And thanks to our guest, very special guest in the studio this evening, Hermann Kelly.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.